Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
LAVA-LITE, naturally the best. Effortlessly nourish and protect your plants with a collection of totally non-toxic, environmentally friendly, sustainable, pH neutral, lightweight and 100% natural products. The collection is made up of 8 different horticultural growing and potting media and pest control products, with each continually offering the same natural benefits: thermal protection, moisture retention and control, soil conditioning, and providing a nutrient boost, as well as being completely child, pet, and environmentally safe. Learn more at lava-lite.co.uk. In this week's episode, we are chatting with writer and author Jean Vernon. Jean is a champion for bees, pollinators, and all wildlife, and she is on a mission to educate everyone about the intricate balance of nature in gardens, from birds to bees and everything in between. So let's find out more about Jean's love of gardens, her books, and get some friendly wildlife gardening take-home tips also. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
How are you doing? Good to see you here.
I'm doing fine. I'm buzzing.
Yeah? Well, you've got a nice background today, Zoom background, which is full of pollinator-rich flowers, I believe.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, absolutely.
It looks a little bit like your front garden, Michael.
Yeah, it does actually. Just this complete mangle of plants in a good way.
Yeah. Well,
which my neighbours are completely shocked by it all the time, but yeah.
That's the way to be. Shock people.
I know.
I love that it looks actually quite natural. It's a background, obviously, on Zoom, what we're recording on, but any moment I wouldn't be surprised if a bee came by, because it does literally look like you're just sitting in front of a beautiful border and there's going to be bees buzzing around any minute. Anyway, we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, we know that Gina's never far from bees, so that's a good thing. So we're going to we've got loads we want to chat to you about today, because you do lots of different things, and obviously you champion bees on the whole, and we're going to really dig into that soon. But first of all, tell us about yourself and your childhood. Did you grow up with plants? Did you always know you wanted to work with plants as well? And when did you then start writing about plants?
I didn't always know I was going to work with plants particularly. I was always fascinated by gardens. My maternal grandmother was not a professional gardener, but she loved her garden, and her birthday and my birthday were really close together, and I was very close to her. So I kind of absorbed a lot of her knowledge and loved it. And we had an allotment when I was growing up, and I used to help on the allotment, and I loved it. My sisters hated it. So so that kind of interface between growing food and providing for the family and harvesting and just being close to nature, I think it definitely in my blood. But I also think that the way I was brought up, having lucky enough to have a garden with, relatives who were interested in gardening and helping out on the allotment, I think that was a really good grounding. I loved animals. We had a dog. I think we had a budgie at one point as well. And I would have had a donkey and a goat and chickens. I would have had everything. But of course, as a child, you are restricted by what your parents will allow you to keep. And I remember vividly my dad telling me that when I had my own home, I could have whatever pets I wanted. Yeah. And I did. So when I had my own home, eventually I had a goat, I had 16 rabbits, I had chickens, I had cats, I've now got dogs. And with that, with my love of animals, and I did think I would work with animals. there was a very close relationship with wildlife. But what I realised was animals get you in the solar plexus, and I realised that I would be a really rubbish nurse or vet, or because I can't bear to kill anything, and I can't bear to see anything in pain or distress. So that took working with animals off the agenda totally for me at the time. And then the next obvious thing was to pursue something with plants, and I ended up doing a degree in botany. When it wasn't trendy. In fact, I think it was the last degree in botany you could do at the time. There was 8 of us on the course. Of course, now it's on trend, and that's fantastic. But, you know, it was a different world back then because I am quite old.
No.
Only as old as you feel.
I don't feel very old, but I know I am quite old.
I don't feel old either. No.
We don't believe you.
What did you do?
So that's in a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah. Tell us about your career progression then at that point. What did you then work in?
Well, then I started working in horticulture, and my first job was at a garden centre, which I absolutely hated. Sorry, guys. And then I worked at a plant nursery, and then I left there and I went on to gardening from which, as it was called then, gardening.
Okay, yeah.
But I do think working in a garden centre and in a nursery gave me a really good grounding for the industry. It was a really good, I mean, I didn't think it at the time, but looking back, the stepping stones were really useful because I learned a lot about retail and I learned a lot about growing for retail. So, you know, that was quite interesting. And then when I worked at Which, that was fascinating. I started as a researcher, and then they kind of trained me up to write. And I started writing articles for them. And that was kind of the beginning of the journalist, gardening writer career, which I never planned, but it all kind of just one thing led to the next. And looking back, you know, I love what I'm doing now. I loved, you know, I am freelance. I've been freelance for 25 years, I think, or more. And I love it.
I love how your career has kind of just gone with the flow. And I think that's like a really important point for younger listeners, perhaps, but anyone also. We're always expected to know what we want to do. But sometimes life just takes you on different routes, and you say yes and give it a go and see what you like. And hopefully, we hope that means it's to do with plants for our listeners, obviously. But just kind of like now look at your amazing career, and you've authored so many books, and, you know, all through kind of just going with what happened at the time.
Yeah, definitely. It is interesting looking back, because it does feel like each phase was a stepping stone to the next. But sometimes, I mean, like the garden centre job I did, I wanted to work with the plants, but they put me in sundries stacking chemicals on the shelves, which, I hated. And, you know, had they put me in the plant department, I might have stayed a bit longer. But even what I did, I learned so much. And I think that's the thing, is you have to make the most of whatever area you end up in. You know, you can't always plan things, and you can turn a bad experience into a positive one. So definitely, you know, for people who don't know what they want, is try something, you know, and grab opportunities. You don't know where they're going to go.
Yeah, we always say yes, don't we, Michael? We're like, just say yes and worry about it later.
And just follow your instincts as well is a big thing. I agree with
saying yes. I've kind of in the mindset now is that, and unless it's really obscure, I am going to embrace most opportunities. So,
and that's how you learn as well.
They take you out of your comfort zone sometimes, but that's
totally. Yeah, I love that feeling. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you have mentioned all of the animals that you've had, from dogs and rabbits. It sounds like you've had or have a petting zoo. But what we would really love to know also is what your own garden is like, because it's not the background on this screensaver, but I'd love to know what it is like when you step outside into your garden. Describe it for us.
Okay, well, I'm really lucky because I live in a really rural location. I live next door to a woodland, and at the front of my house, my front door opens out into a woodland garden that I've planted with different birches, and there's a serpentine path that goes down through them. And then at the end where the gate is, you look out into fields. So it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. So the front garden for me is quite low maintenance, and it's full of trees and shrubs. And right now the autumn colours are fantastic. The cornus red stems, and the cornus cuosa is just changing colour, and the spindle bushes, and I've got a spring flowering cherry, and the colours of that are amazing. And then the buttery yellow leaves on the birch are stunning. So the front garden is really quite woodlandy. And then in the back, it's not a massive area, but it is quite big. In the back, I've got a beautiful Hartley Botanic glass house in the middle, which is my biggest indulgence and my guilty secret. And then I have raised beds with vegetables and fruit. I have chickens. And then I've got a sunken seated area where I've got a camping table and chairs outside. In the summer, there's a parasol up, and I can go and sit out with my coffee, and I can look up at a pollinator border that I've planted, which isn't
so
like
nice.
my background. But what I do is I sit there drinking my coffee and go, oh, there's a bee. Oh, there's a bee. Oh, look at that. And drive my husband nuts, but that's fine. But I like the fact that I can sit below and see and listen to what's coming in or what's going on. And I've usually got my phone with me so I can take pictures. And the rest of the garden is mostly trees and shrubs. I've got a mixed hedge with lots of different things in. It backs onto a woodland. It's a nice place to be. But like you guys, I'm not always here, and doesn't perhaps get the attention that it should. But it is full of wildlife. It's a bit wild. We have all sorts coming into the garden. I have snakes and lizards and hedgehogs.
I can do anything apart from snakes.
Oh, well, yeah.
I'm not scared of spiders or anything, but snakes.
I'm not keen gardening with the adders. That's a bit freaky. And I did once find a dog playing with one, which was a bit... God. Yeah, and the cat got bitten by one. But other than that, they're lovely.
I mean, try living here in North Carolina where there are copperheads and cottonmouths in the state. It's like I am addicted to a snake identification board because I'm so paranoid about seeing snakes. I want to be able to identify them,
Oh my God. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, Jean, but we're going to start talking about bees and wildlife, but I think although it seems a bit obvious, I want you to kind of answer this question in your own words as to why is it important to get a balance in the garden for wildlife? Because we hear a lot of different information, and it'd be great for you to just summarize for us.
Okay, well, I think it's a case of trying to understand that everything in nature, apart from us, has its place. So pretty much everything is a meal for something else. And if we suddenly decide that, all right, for example, we don't like snakes, and we decide we're going to kill the snakes, we're taking out a predator lair. I mean, maybe snakes aren't the best example, but think about, people don't understand about wasps. I think, what's the point of wasp? I'm always being asked that. And yet wasps are so important. We have 7,000 species of wasps in the UK. We have about 6 species that are the ones that annoy us in the summer. But wasps feed their babies live prey. So they take things out of the garden that we don't want, like caterpillars and aphids and scale bugs, and they collect them up really neatly, and they feed them to their babies. And wasps are pollinators too. So they've got like a really mixed role. So if we have a wasp nest in the garden, of course it's a problem if it's somewhere, where you're constantly walking through, or there's a danger of you forgetting about it and walking on it. But they're doing a really important job. If you destroy that wasp's nest, the first thing you do is introduce really toxic chemicals into your garden that affects everything. The second thing you're doing is you're taking away a natural predator. And, the grubs are food for other predators. There's a hoverfly that raises its babies inside a wasp's nest. It's really complicated. Everything is interconnected. So if we suddenly take out, a section of it, things start to collapse a bit. And it might be okay for a while, but eventually you destroy the balance. And it goes all the way back down to the soil. The soil is the secret to the health of our gardens. And, if we feed the soil with homemade compost and natural plant foods, and we recycle everything, then we encourage the microbes and the fungi and the mini beasts, which are food for something else. And then more wildlife moves in because you've got a healthy ecosystem. And then the bigger wildlife, like the birds and the hedgehogs, they eat some of the other things that we don't want in the garden. And it is an absolute functioning cycle. It's fascinating. I mean, it's so complicated because there's so many strands that it is a web, really, of everything.
Yeah, and we're the ones that impact it the most, aren't we? We're the ones that come and change that ecosystem. So understanding that cycle is so important, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we can destroy it, or equally we can nurture it and support it
and enhance
and bring it back, which is, as gardeners, unfortunately, I mean, we're doing a lot as gardeners, but we really need to step up even more to offset the damage that non-gardeners and other people are doing. And that I think that's quite a tough thing to ask gardeners to do, because they're already doing loads, but there is more that we can all do. Even in a tiny plot, that would make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've mentioned wasps, and obviously we know so much about bees. They've been highlighted so much over the past few years. But there's quite a lot more unfamiliar bees and pollinators, aren't there, in the gardens that perhaps we don't really recognise, because we always see the bumblebee, or we know wasp. But can you tell us some of the more unfamiliar ones? I'm going to sneeze. Was that about to sneeze?
Oh, Ellen, you're all class.
So sorry.
Bless you.
Unfamiliar. Tell us some unfamiliar bees and pollinators.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Save the Bees campaign has been a bit hijacked by the honeybee. And the honeybee is really important. It's rightly revered, but it's only one of the bee species that we have in the UK. It's the only bee in the UK that makes honey as we know it. And it is important, but it's not really in trouble. It's our wild bees, our bumblebees and our solitary bees that need our help. So the Save the Bee campaign, whilst it has highlighted that there's an issue, it seems to have kind of been sidetracked to honeybees. And I'm trying to change the rhetoric to embrace the bumblebees and the solitary bees. And you mentioned bumblebees. We have 24 species of bumblebees in the UK. We have 7 or 8 that are relatively common in our gardens. And we have 2 on the brink of extinction, and the rest are rare or very rare. So, it's a really sort of complicated mix. And then we have something in the region of 250 species of what we call solitary bees, and they don't live in a colony. Bumblebees and honeybees, they live in a colony. The solitary bees, they just have a mother bee. I call them the single mums of bee world.
Oh, really?
Because the mother bee does all the work. And we have about 250, maybe 260 different species. And some of them are really fascinating. Well, they're all fascinating, but some of them have got really quirky stories. So things like the leafcutter bee, that you might have seen the notches cut out of your roses in the summer. The mother bee will stand on a leaf and cut round her body. And then she rolls those pieces of leaf into little tiny sleeping bags for her babies. And into each sleeping bag, she'll lay an egg, and then she'll collect a ball of pollen and she'll make him a packed lunch. And she pops that in the sleeping bag and seals it up. So the leafcutter bee is a commonly seen, or the holy leaves that the leafcutter bee leaves is a commonly seen thing in our gardens. They're not a pest. They won't kill our plants. But we have a fascinating solitary bee that loves the fluff of the lamb's ears plants.
Oh, so, really?
There's a solitary bee called a wool carder bee, and the mother bee, she shaves the fluff off the Stachys byzantina leaves, and she weaves a fabric, and she makes it into a little pocket, for her babies, and into each pocket she lays an egg, and she makes a packed lunch and she seals it up. So stackies. So there are certain plants you can associate with certain bees. We actually have a bumblebee called the garden bumblebee. It's called Bombus hortorum, and she has a really, really long tongue. It's longer than her body, and she flies with her tongue sticking out like a unicorn.
Wow.
She folds it under her tummy, and she feeds from foxgloves and long tubular flowers. So if you grow normal foxgloves, if you see bumblebees going in and out, the chances are it's probably the garden bumblebee, because she's big bodied, she can get in, and she's got a really long tongue to reach the nectar.
Oh my God.
So there's kind of like, our pollinators and our plants evolve side by side, which is why sometimes the native plants are important. But generally speaking, they're searching for nectar, which is their sugar rush, their energy food, and they're collecting pollen, which is protein rich, to feed their babies. So bees, pollen and nectar for bees, those are really crucial ingredients of their life cycle. So fascinating bees. We have 3 solitary bees that nest in snail shells, and they use the little waterproof snail shells for their babies to keep them dry. I mean, that's amazing. So don't get me started, I think,
No, we love it. This is fantastic.
It is wonderful.
There's so many amazing there's a bee called the longhorned bee, and the antennae are like absolutely enormous. I don't know how they fly, and it's such a quirky little character. It nests in sandy cliffs, and you might not ever see it, but you could Google it and find pictures of it. It's absolutely fascinating. There's a little bee that emerges in April, a solitary bee, that's kind of black and white. I call it the panda bee. I get into trouble for giving them cutesy names, but I often work with kids and they like that. But it nests in, a lot of our bees nest in the ground. About 60 species nest in the ground. So you might have them nesting in your lawn, or in a bank. Another of my favorites is, I love the name of this, the hairy-footed flower bee. And the male
that's like a drag name for a bee.
It is. The male has got really feathery legs, and when they mate, he strokes the female's eyes with his feathery leg. Apparently it's to distract her, but I don't know if that's true. But they nest in cob walls. If you go to Wesley, outside the learning centre, there's a colony of them. And the males are gingery. They're really cute. They're sort of round, a bit like a bumblebee shape, but small. And the females are black. And they're just really cute. And they're just so clever. The males emerge before the females when they hatch. So they disperse. The males are always at the front of the nest, and the females are at the back. So if a woodpecker pecks the front of the nest out, it's the boys that get eaten, and the girls are safe at the back. I mean, there's loads of things you think, well, how did that evolve? That's so clever.
How did that even happen? How do they know that that's what they need to do, like, to survive? Like, we don't
trial and error. Maybe.
We don't give wildlife the credit it deserves at all.
No.
Do we? I mean, there's so many different bees, like you were saying, and we'll just mention your books soon, which I know have loads of them in as well. But are there other pollinators that we might see in our gardens as well? Anything unfamiliar?
Yeah, I mean, not everything that visits a flower is a pollinator, but we have 280 species of bees. We have 2,500 species of moths, 57 butterflies, about 7,000 wasps. Some of our beetles are pollinators. Then the hoverflies, there's about 270 species of them. So yes, lots. I mean, there are accidental pollinators, things that visit a flower and pick up pollen and move it around, that none of them know they're pollinators. So the mix of pollinators is fascinating. I think they think there's about 1,500 pollinators in the UK, but it's probably more than that. And the mix from your ladybirds to your hornets to some of the moths, the butterflies, lots and lots of them. And there's lots of bee mimics, hoverflies that look like bees that are pollinators. Things like the narcissus fly, that's a pollinator. That's actually a hoverfly, but we give it this bad, wicked name because it eats our daffodil bulbs. Well, if we grow slug food, we expect the slugs to eat it. If we grow narcissi, then the narcissi hoverfly will lay its eggs in it. We need to grow a few decoy things to allow them, because they're all part of the biodiversity. I don't think we can pick and choose anymore, because everything's so if you don't want narcissi fly and you've got a problem, then stop growing narcissi for a bit. I don't know what the answer is, but it's complicated.
Okay. Well, this episode will be going out during the winter.
Okay.
Like, how important is it to have pollinator-rich plants in those colder months? And what kind of window would you then be wanting to provide for pollinators in? Is there a point where pollinators are not looking, for example, right in the depths of winter? How does that whole calendar work, please?
There's not that much activity in the winter, depending on what the weather does. So if we talk about bees, the only bees that you will see out in the midst of winter, and then only on a warm day, will be the honeybees, because they overwinter as a colony. And there is one species of bumblebee which sometimes nests over the winter. It shouldn't, but the buff-tailed bumblebee sometimes has a nest that goes over the winter months. So those will need food. So your mahonias, your winter flowering honeysuckle, your snowdrops, anything that's in flower in the winter will support those. In terms of the other pollinators, it's mixed again. Some of the butterflies overwinter as adults, but generally they just hunker down for the winter. Some overwinter as eggs, some overwinter as chrysalis. Same with the moths. So a lot of our pollinators, their life cycle, they spend the majority of their time as larvae and grubs. So they will overwinter as larvae and grubs, and they've already fed up. So your butterflies, caterpillars, they feed up on your plants or plant leaves, and then they hunker down. They've done their feeding and they pupate. Well, they probably overwinter as pupa. And then they emerge in the spring. So they're not looking they've already fed. They don't always actually feed much as adults. And by then it's nectar they're looking for. So winter's a bit of an odd one. I mean, nesting sites really important, not interfering with areas, tussocky grass, nesting, overwintering sites are really important. So you might have things hunkered down. You might dig up a chrysalis in the garden. You might disturb something. You might dig up an overwintering bumblebee. Just put it back where you found it. But as to plants, yes, it's important to have something in flower, but it is quite a quiet time in pollinator world. But it's late winter and early spring that we really need to step up.
So what month is that we're talking? Is that then February, March? Or?
Yeah, it does depend on the weather. I mean, the bumblebees will start emerging in February. They tend to overwinter in a north-facing bank so that any winter light doesn't wake them. And so they start emerging, depending on the species, February and March. And then they need food. So then they need the crocus, the snowdrops, the hellebores, the early, and dandelions are so really, really important, especially early in the season. And the one thing that I don't think people understand about pollinators, and it's probably the best take-home message, is they all have different tongue lengths, and they can't all feed from the same shaped flowers. So if you think about a dandelion, that's more generalist. A pollinator can land on it and walk around and feed from it. But if you remember the long-tongued garden bumblebee, it doesn't emerge until a little bit later, but that needs long tubular flowers. So you need a variety of flower shapes to cater for the different pollinators, not just the bees. Butterflies have long tongues, flies have short tongues. It's a real mixture. So it's not just a case of having something in flower, it's a case of having a variety of flower shapes.
And do you feel like, one more question around that. Do you feel like in terms of the year, in our gardens in the UK, that is when we don't provide as good as the rest of the year?
Yeah,
is that kind of like a real kind of dry moment?
Yeah. February, March is absolutely critical for the queen bumblebees, as is September, October. because there are a few species of all the pollinators that are still active, that are preparing for winter. And a lot of a lot of borders are cut down, or they run out of steam by August onwards. That's another critical time. And there's a couple of species of bumblebees in particular, one that's really in trouble, and it emerges in May or late April, and it carries on into September, October, and if the forage is gone, it can't complete its life cycle. So February, March definitely, but also September, October is important, definitely.
We're so focused, aren't we, on summer gardening, all the flowers that grow in the summer. There's so many things we can have in our garden all year round, not just, for us to look at and enjoy, but for,
because it makes us feel better as well.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to do it for selfish reasons, do it because it makes you feel good, but ultimately that's going to be helping wildlife out there as well. So there's something I wanted to pick up on with you, Jean, because you mentioned earlier on that when you were working in the garden centre, you were allocated stacking shelves with chemicals, which, really frustrated you. Why is it so important not to be using chemicals in the garden when it comes to, keeping that ecosystem well?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying about everything being a meal for something. So if you've got caterpillars, let's say you've got caterpillars on your kale, and you think, I don't want caterpillars on my kale, I'm going to spray them with something. Well, those caterpillars are food for the blue tits, they're food for the wasps. They play a really important role in the garden, and they're going to become butterflies, which are important pollinators. But also, you're spraying a product that is designed to kill. And do you really want your kale dressed with toxins? I don't. That's an aside, but it's really about the natural balance. As soon as we start applying chemicals to, whatever it is we don't want in the garden, we are messing up the natural cycle. I talked about, wasp nests, getting the pest control in. They put in really toxic chemicals to destroy a wasp nest, and they persist in our gardens. They will affect, other creatures. So insecticides aren't selective. They're designed to kill insects. So if you spray something, you're not just going to kill what you're spraying, but you have the potential to kill other things. And, where do we draw the line? Personally, I don't think that garden chemicals or pesticides have a place in our gardens. I don't think we need them. If we step back, I get quite excited when I see the aphids on the roses early in spring, because I know that the blue tits will move in and the ladybirds will arrive. Ladybirds and hoverflies, they lay their eggs on plants where they know there's going to be an aphid population. And so when their eggs hatch and their little grubs emerge, they've got food. So we don't need to be spraying.
And kind of nature looks after it itself.
It does. But the problem is,
once we relax.
Once you relax. But if you move into a new build environment, and there's 50 new houses, that balance hasn't built up. And I can see the frustration if you're trying to plant a garden and there isn't the natural balance there because, you're gardening on builders' rubble and there's nothing else around. It takes quite a while for that to re-establish. And I can see why people reach for it. And also we've been brainwashed, previous generations. That's what everyone did. Yeah. So it's not a criticism, but it's just like a wake-up call because everything's in trouble now. Insects are in massive decline. And a lot of people don't like insects. We call them creepy crawlies, but they're so important.
Yeah, and people don't realise that. Like, there's a few things I'd love to pick up on. One is the kind of teaching everyone that pesticide use was great. Do you remember the adverts on TV where there was the dandelion going, help, and then the guy with the big pesticide spray.
We've come a long way since then,
yeah, like to kill it. But I've still seen that advert because I posted about a similar advert to that. Like they should just be banned. You should absolutely not be able to advertise something.
Ellen, in America or in UK? Where did you see that?
In the
Really?
UK, that's bad for the environment. It just shouldn't be allowed. And someone said something to me a few weeks back now. Do you remember when you were young and you'd go on holiday? Like we used to drive from Norfolk down to the Isle of Wight, and the car at the end of the drive would be covered in insects, dead insects.
Yes.
And now, I mean, that's horrible. I get it. But now you can drive hundreds of miles and you maybe got a handful. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just not so many there. And then the other thing you were saying about the different, like you can understand why people would pick something up, such as a pesticide, say when they're starting a garden on a new build. I've experienced this kind of both sides. So my allotment, I don't kill, move, touch anything. I don't do anything. It's no dig. It's veganic. So I don't use it's organic, and I don't use any animal product either, which is a whole different thing. But I don't do anything. It's planted. So, all wildlife is welcome. And it has an abundance of food and flowers, and I don't ever do anything to it. So I can always talk about how amazing that is. But when we got our apartment with a balcony and we were 5 or 6 floors up, that was really hard to maintain a healthy ecosystem, because there were tons of aphids and bugs, and all the creepy crawlies came in, and there wasn't any predators around. I didn't do anything. Over about 3 years, it started to begin to become like a cycle where it all worked better. I never used anything either, of course. I just let it be. But yes, it's really frustrating. And if you've just got your new garden and you want to see flowers grow and they're not growing and they're being eaten, that is tough. But all I can say is stick with it, because overall, it is better to wait and lose a few flowers, a few plants here and there, and let the system build itself up. But that's a really hard message, to get out there to
people. It takes a lot of patience.
But
it's a really important message, because it's understanding or believing that that's really going to happen, that's really important.
Ellen, actually, can I ask Ellen a question that I've just thought about? Would you say, like, obviously we've experienced in US life as well as UK life, would you say, and hopefully your answer is going to be what I expect, which makes us feel better about what we're doing, but would you say there's more awareness in UK or US? How is it different? Because, when you're talking about this dandelion advert, things like this, in my head, I imagine that still happens in the US a lot, but you could give us a there.
I think there's pockets. Like the US, of course, is much bigger. So you've got pockets of groups and people and environments where they're very, very aware of the decline in insects, pollinators, and everything else overall. And then that's kind of like a real big thing. But there's so many
terms of general
areas, where people don't know and they're not aware at all. And that's not that dissimilar to the UK. It's just on a larger scale, like in the UK, we work in horticulture. So we see it more, we learn about it more. But anyone who is not in the gardening world at all, they might not have ever seen the message to not use pesticides. And that's no different. Just it's on a bigger scale. That's how I kind of see it. Like there's so many people who I know who don't garden, and I will go say to their house, and I would have said to them, oh, why not? You could plant some roses over there. That would be really nice. And they planted some roses, and then I go around to their house and I see like a spray or a pesticide. And I'm like, why do you have that? And they're like, oh, because we have black fly. Do you know what I mean? Because they didn't know. So they go to the garden centre and they see all these shelves. You can cure your black fly. Use this, spray this on. They don't even know that is bad, because there's nothing saying it's bad. Like we know it because we're in this industry, but that is no different in the US. It's just bigger.
Okay.
The impending great huge problems with insect decline is still the same here as it is in the UK, for sure.
But sorry, go on, Jean.
I think that there is a huge divide between gardeners and people with gardens. So as gardeners or horticulturalists or whatever you want to call us, or people with a connection with nature and gardens, they know all this. But people with gardens, whether they're newbies living in a flat with a balcony, or the friends you've just described, Ellen, they're not gardeners, they're not horticulturalists. They haven't got that knowledge, and so they, like you said, go to the garden centre, or they go somewhere for advice, or they look online and they're bombarded with, oh well, you need this product and you need, and of course the garden industry, is a thriving industry, and let's not go there, but to me, we need to educate the people with gardens that don't know what they're doing
in a very clear way as well, because I don't think this kind of awareness has gone mainstream yet at all, has it? And that's the point where people really take notice, isn't it? Sadly, but that's how
I think it will. In the way, horticulture and houseplants are on trend. I mean, we've got vegan January or veganuary or whatever it's called. We never imagined that was taken off, and it has. I do think it's coming, but for me, it's not happening fast enough. I think there's a missing generation. Well, the generation isn't missing, but the knowledge for that generation is missing. What I learned from my grandmother or my grandparents, and my parents were quite engaged. But I think for a lot of, I don't know whether they're millennials or whatever, they didn't learn from their parents or their grandparents. And I think there's somewhere it all fell apart, and I'm not quite sure where or how. But how we stick that back together, I don't know.
Yeah, this is such a good discussion. I think this is going to be a very popular interview. You're just brilliant to talk to, Gina. I knew you'd be good. I just want to ask you, what would be maybe 5 plants that you think are a must-have in a garden or a patio pot, balcony planter? Let's make it accessible to everyone.
55, please. Okay. Well, before I kind of get into patio pots and small gardens, one thing that I think people overlook when they want to plant for pollinator, trees and shrubs. And trees, trees flower, and surprisingly, even sycamore trees are really important for pollinators because they have loads of nectar. So 3 established trees apparently have as much forage as an acre of meadow. Now, that's quite shocking, but also quite amazing. Now, of course, most gardens haven't got room for 3 established trees. But, even shrubs, things like flowering currant, which is one of my top pollinator plants. If you think about the flower cluster on a flowering currant, it's like a bunch of grapes. There's lots of flowers in one place, and there's hundreds of bunches on a bush. So flowering currant is a fantastic plant. So one plant with 3,000 flowers, let's say one shrub, is equivalent to the nectar you would get from 16,000 primroses. So you start to see the value of one shrub. So if you've got a balcony or a patio and you've got a big pot, you could grow a flowering currant, and that'd be really powerful. And it's an early spring flower. It's really important for I know I keep going on about bumblebees, but one of the early bumblebee loves flowering currants. So flowering currant has to be one of my 5. Well, forget about trees, because in a small garden you haven't always got space. But don't rule out having a flowering hedge. I'm not going to give specific on that because I'm only allowed 5 plants. Okay, so my top pollinator plant, so not just for bees, is Viper's bugloss, Echium vulgare.
Okay.
It's a wildflower. It's hardy. It has the most fantastic azure blue flowers, really rich in nectar. Biennial, so you sow it one year and it flowers the following year. It replenishes its nectaries every 20 minutes.
No way! Oh my
God. Long as it's well watered. And that's another little proviso is in the summer, if your plants dry out, they stop making nectar. So if you've got a plant, you think, this should be really good for bees, but there's no bees, just check whether it's been watered. That's really important. But Viper's bugloss is my number 1 plant, easy to grow from seed, It just ticks all the boxes. And the flowers...
And it'll self-seed a little bit as well, I believe.
Oh, yeah,
right?
self-seeds. So, and that brings me to another sneaky...
So you've got it forever.
I have a sneaky trick with things that self-seed that are good for pollinators. Dig them up, the seedlings, pop them up and give them to all of your friends. Don't tell them, oh, they're good for pollinators or good for insects, because lots of people don't like insects. Just say, this is a lovely plant for your garden, and get them to plant it. Because we need to turn our gardens up. We need the males to be able to move from one population to another to keep the genetics strong. And by joining our gardens up and planting these pit stops, that's really a powerful thing to do. So whatever you've got that's good for pollinators that self-seeds, like your Verbena bonariensis and hellebores or whatever, just share them. Share them. So Viper's Bugos, my number one. Hellebores are really, as long as they're singles, not doubles.
Okay.
One hellebore flower has as much nectar as 157 snowdrops.
Wow.
So if you've only got a pot, you've got your pot on your balcony or your patio, you've only got one pot, plant a hellebore, because it's a really powerful plant because it's full of nectar. Again, keep it watered, and the little nodding heads are like umbrellas, so the pollinators can, if it's raining, they can hide underneath and they can get their nectar. And the bees and the pollinators, they don't care that you paid 55 quid for it, or if it's purple, black, or if it's spotty, or if it's stripy. They just want the nectar. So hellebores are my number two.
Jean, can I just jump in there? Do you think that breeders should be looking at breeding flowers that are actively creating more pollen and nectar? Because that's never a consideration. We look at longer flowering or better performance, but do they actually then select a variety of hellebore that might be a good white, but does it also have a lot of nectar? And is there a way to measure it as well?
There is a way to measure it. There was quite a lot of research done, but I think hellebores in general, as long as they're not doubles where the nectaries have been, sacrificed for extra petals, I think hellebores will be rich in nectar. But I do think it is something that is not considered whatsoever. I mean, they're very quick to label things up as perfect for pollinators or plants for pollinators, but then they may have raised it using pesticides. And the problem with that is that the pesticides come up through the plant and they come out in the nectar and pollen, and then they're concentrated back at the nest. So, with all these things we're talking about, growing your own from seed, taking cuttings from plants that are pesticide free, buying organic, are really more powerful things to do for the pollinators. So hellebores, share yourself seeders, the seedlings, share them, and keep them free of pesticides. I can't believe you've only given me 5 plants. That's just awful.
You've flowering currant, echium, hellebores. You've got 2 left, right?
I've got 2 left. I can't believe you've only... I'm going to...
I'll stop moaning.
Okay. Comfrey. Comfrey flowers, really rich in nectar. The short-tongued bumblebees will chew a hole over the top of the nectary and they will rob the nectar from behind, and the longer-tongued pollinators can reach the nectar from the front. But comfrey's brilliant for making your own plant food. It's great for adding to the compost heap. It's a really powerful plant to have in our gardens anyway, although it can spread, but it flowers for ages. And if you cut a third of it down and do the Chelsea chop, then you can extend the flowering time, so you're prolonging the nectar for the pollinator, which is really good. So I think comfrey has to be in my top 5.
One more.
Okay. I can't decide. It's going to have to be a summer one, and I can't decide between echinops, the globe thistle, or fuchsias.
Okay.
And I choose echinops because it's got lots of flowers in one place, and it flowers when the queen bumblebees are feeding up for winter. But I choose fuchsias. They flower for weeks on end and they're really rich in nectar. So I've really got 5 there, but that was 6.
I'll let you off. That's really good. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Very good.
But that's really mean. Because I haven't talked about the herbs like the marjorams and the rosemary. and I haven't talked about the fruit and the veg. And there's so much more. Well, all of that are in my books, of course.
So that's our next question. That's our next question for you, Jean. I think actually what would be a great idea is if you send us your top 10, we can put them into the description of this episode. So anyone listening, if you read the description, then you can see Jean's other 5 favorites. Just there you go. You've got 10. 55. Even though you snuck in 6, 7, 8, you've got 10. But tell 55. Us about your books. Like, I've read your books. I think they're absolutely amazing. I love them. So informative. Tell us about, all about them and where listeners can find them, and also where they can find them on social media.
Okay, so my first book is called The Secret Lives of Garden Bees, and that's about our bumblebees and our solitary bees. That is now on its 6th reprint. You can buy signed copies off my website, which is thegreengenie.com. But you can also buy them from other online outlets. I'm very fond of my bee book, and what can I say about it? There's quite a lot of plant information in there. There's a lot about nesting sites, which is really important. I think it introduces some of the quirky stories about bumblebees, and talks about all sorts of problems that bees face and quirky behavior of bumblebees, and generally people really like it, which was lovely because I didn't really expect that. It was a bit weird. And then my second book, which is called Attracting Garden Pollinators, it has a chapter on bees, but it has chapters on hoverflies, butterflies, moths, beetles, hornets, wasps, flies, so all of our pollinators, and each chapter tells stories about some of the quirky stories, some of the quirky characters, and there's a bit more plant information in that book, because when I wrote the bee book, I think I was told I could write 45,000 words, and I got a bit carried away. I'm a bit renowned for overwriting, and I wrote something like 78,000 words, and I just thought, they'll put some more pages in. Well, they didn't. They went back and said, "Can you cut 30,000 words?" And my original vision for the book was it would be half about bees and half about plants. And what I had to do was really, really hack down the plant section because it had to be about bees. Yeah. So I cut out about 30,000 words about plants. But I kept it. And then when I wrote the pollinator book, I took the best of the plant material and I put it in the pollinator book and re-edited it. So that's kind of what happened. I'd never written a book before, and it was a huge learning curve. So,
that's cool.
Well, it wasn't wasted. You wrote it and it wasn't wasted.
It wasn't wasted. I never chuck copy away. So I've always, if I have to rewrite something or rework it, then I just start a new version, and I've always kept the original. Because I've learned the hard way that somewhere along the line, someone will say, "Oh, do you know what? I actually preferred the first one." And if you deleted it, it's gone. So
cool.
I learned the hard way.
Thank you.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you so much.
I'm a bit aware of time because, Jean, you write a lot more than you need to in books, but also you're longer on interviews than planned. We usually stop at 35 minutes,
But that happens in garden club talks.
Content. Honestly.
Oh, good. Yeah, I get that in garden
it's brilliant,
talk.
Honestly.
Thank you.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. Like, the content's amazing. There's so much information. I know listeners are absolutely going to love it. Go and check out Jean on social media, Addicted to Bees. And go and check out the books. And Jean, thank you so much for being here. And I've enjoyed chatting with you and also looking at your wonderful background too.
Thank you.
Oh.
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There we go. What is that?
It's the snapper from Waitrose. Not Waitrose, John Lewis.
Oh, yay.
How cool's that?
That's really cute. You went to see.
They sent it to me because I included them in a reel that I did.
That's so cute. I love that advert. I was just like, that's amazing. We have like a big plant in a Christmas advert. That is awesome. Hi, Adam. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You might be on mute, maybe. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Maybe that will come up. There you go.
That's
there we go. Adam Green-Fingered City Boy is here with us on the podcast. Yippee. And Michael has changed into Snapper from the John Lewis advert.
He loved that at Kew Gardens Christmas lights. It was like a boy at Christmas.
I totally bet.
It was mega. That's why they sent me this, because I tagged them in the reel.
So you got that freebie because you tagged them in a reel on Instagram.
Yeah.
That is so cute.
Gotta move quick. That's the thing. I did it within an hour. And then they sent me this, and also some shortbread and some chocolates that have got like Snapper on the side as well. It's really cool.
That is the cutest thing ever. You two, can I just say, I saw you gone to Kew to see the lights.
Were you jealous?
I had a little bit of FOMO going on there, and I don't usually have FOMO. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I was like, no, that looks like really good fun. But just to kick this off, I have thoroughly enjoyed watching the development of your bromance over the last year.
Ellen is so jealous, honestly.
Michael's carrying me.
Get a new best friend.
Yeah, you're his new best friend. Now we cannot be friends. That's it. We're over. That's so cute. Are you just gonna hang out with it there on this? I know what's happening. He wants me to take a photograph. How
did you know?
That's literally what's happening. He's like, come on, take the photograph. There's the photo.
Right, now we can all relax. Adam, how are you? I see
I'm good, thank you.
in the background. I got no idea what that means.
Yeah. Nottingham Forest shirts and some photos from famous goals.
Oh my gosh. That's
Michael,
in the spare room.
Nottingham Forest.
yeah. I've got zero knowledge about football. I live above a stadium, but I don't know. Well, I didn't take the right floor. If I was on 12th floor, I could see the whole match. But I couldn't see a corner. Oh, wow.
Very cute. How are you, Adam? How's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not enjoying these dark nights, I've got to say. And it's getting colder, and and I've still not started ball planting. Like, I've done a few alliums, but apart from that, I've got so much to do.
Honestly, every year it's like got to fit in the bulb planting thing. But I mean, I've planted. I know tulips you can wait up to Christmas or even later, really, but I've planted daffodils just before Christmas before. Do you know what I mean? And they've been totally fine, so I don't think there's any panic.
I've done some in January before. Like, I've done quite a lot in January, just because I've just been that disorganised, and they've always come up like really well. So yeah, I'm not too panicking yet. The only problem is the longer you leave it, the colder it is. And then when you're using the ball planter, your hands are freezing.
The life of a gardener.
Everyone's always like fussing about tulips being later and stuff. But when I was at the Kirkenhof a couple of weeks ago and they let me plant some stuff, they were saying they don't really bother because like they say, obviously then the tulips could get a virus or different pests and stuff. But if you're growing the tulips as an annual anyway, which many of us are because a lot of the new varieties don't come back, then it really doesn't matter. You can plant them anytime because they're not going to pick up the virus in that period of time. And at Kirkenhof, the bulbs are in the ground for such a short period of time, literally from planting in October, November, and then they're pulled up in May. So there's no real chance to get disease.
Because obviously, like, I'm not the most knowledgeable gardener because I'm sort of quite new to it. So obviously, I just know that everyone bangs on about not doing tulips.
But people bang on a lot. That's the problem.
But that is then for me, where I don't necessarily always do it out of choice. It's just because I'm late time anyway, getting my bulbs in. But then you are always in this situation where you think, oh well, I've got to say, don't plant your tulips yet. Do it after the others because otherwise people are at you.
Oh, yeah. If you do anything that's out of textbook theory, people come for you, don't they? Like, no, you mustn't do it like that. You do gardening how you do gardening. Never mind all of the rest.
Yeah. And I think I think I used to be a lot more laid back in that sense before the account grew a little bit. Because I think like when the account then grew a little bit, there is that sort of like, oh no, I don't want to
feel responsible.
I don't want to get arted for being like a noob, which I am.
But what tulips also is that if you could go to the shop and buy whatever, you just go, I like that colour, or I like that, shape or form, and you buy those tulips. But all tulips do actually flower at various stages throughout spring anyway. So you can easily be buying some that will bloom later in spring and some that will bloom a little earlier in spring and not even know that. But you would plant them and then you're like, but mine aren't flowering yet. But it isn't because they're not meant to.
And some people as well, they'll say that like, tulips are annuals, treat them as annuals. But I have loads of tulips that come up every year that the lady who had the house previously planted. So they do sort of come back. And this year I'm only planting one tulip variety that was recommended by the middle-sized garden blog, Alexandra, and it's ballerina, because she was saying that she planted ballerina years ago and they come up every year just as good and they spread really well as well. So I'm trying those this year.
I think it depends on your conditions and the plant. Like it's so many different things.
Oh, sorry. It's with because the older ones, like the Darwin hybrids, tend to be much better perennials because they're not so highly bred. So it is like the really new, like flashy ones, like ice cream and kind of all of this really modern stuff. It just doesn't have the same kind of vigor. But anything that's like from the Darwin family is like reliably perennial as well. So I
had some old Darwin hybrids. They were kind of like reddish, maybe a little purplish tone to them in our old.
It depends in the genetics. It's not so clear as colour as kind of anything coming back from that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had them in our old cottage garden, and we were there for about 11 years, and I planted them maybe in the first 1 or 2 years that we moved in, and they were still flowering, literally, no joke. Not with as much vigour, I might add, but they were still flowering by the time we left. And that's got to be like 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It just shows the younger generation of tulips are snowflakes, doesn't it?
But also, because I want to pick up on something that you guys said, because actually, like when you talk about different advice, I feel that because I go and see a lot of suppliers and growers, I almost get a different layer of advice, which is kind of like commercial, the way they do it commercially. And I think we can like use a lot of that in our home gardens. But this is then not home garden advice. This is not what you'd see in the books, but almost like sometimes it's like really like gold dust intel, like what they said about tulips at Kirkenhof. The other thing, when I was at another growers last year, they were talking about ones that are perennial. The reason that disease goes back in the soil is if you let the petals fall. And when the petals kind of fall on the soil, like if you tidy up your tulips a lot better before they die down, you can avoid disease spreading if you've got ones that are more perennial. And it's advice like this that we never get as public gardeners. But it's grower intel. Someone needs to write a book about grower intel, don't they?
There you go. That's your next book. Yes. That's literally your next book.
Because it's such useful stuff that just doesn't get... And sometimes, I'm on a rant now, here I go. These people are like you say, Adam, like they're kind of recycling the advice. And, there was one recently and I was like saying some of these things and because they kind of only know the things that swim around in the books and in the TV programs, that no one's ever talking to the industry level to get those extra real-time tips. I'm going to write a book. Can you two carry on without me?
Right, so you need to think of a title. So your last book was Hortus Curious, so this has to be Hortus...
Intel. I don't know.
Yeah. It's got to be something with like sort of like Secret Service intelligence. Like, you got to use that word intelligence, like intel, like...
Hortus Intel. I think that's a perfect title for your next book, Michael. We expect to see it in 2025.
Okay. I've just written that down in my notepad. I'll come to that in a week. I'll be like, what did I mean?
But it is true, because it's the same sort of thing with sort of my day job in like, because I work in packaging. and then everyone's sort of like, oh, like get rid of plastics completely.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, didn't we?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It like use recycled board, but then like recycled board uses like more energy than sort of virgin board, and do you know what I mean? So there's all these sort of different sort of things that sort of go into these sort of processes and manufacturing processes, and we sort of like as a consumer only hear one thing, and it's normally sort of like the best way,
and it's always emotional
the best way. Do you know what I mean? You can't always plant your tulips in November, or do you know what I mean, because of life gets in the way, or do you know what I mean, stuff like that. And I think that's what these books don't take into account sometimes, maybe.
But that's we had a great
really good point actually with the packaging and stuff. Like that's the thing. Like you said, Michael. Like it's an emotional response. So it's marketing.
I told him to do a reel on it because he gave so much great info last week when we were at Q, and really intelligent. And I think the problem is, Ellen, you're right, emotional, and also information gets repeated without people actually thinking about what they're repeating or using their own brains as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got one for you then about advice. What do you think about the tags that I keep seeing on orchids saying water with 2 ice cubes?
No, have you got that in US? Because that is really...
Got that in the US.
That's really... No, because it's an equivalent of an ice cube a week.
But it doesn't say that.
Supplier that put it out incorrectly a few years ago, and it obviously has gone around the world. It was just badly translated because it means the equivalent of an ice cube. I find that these days to share a shot glass of water a week is much better.
It's like on the tag, it literally says water with 2 ice cubes. Put 2 ice cubes. And so they have some, you know, like B&Q in the UK, it's the same here as Home Depot.
It's been repeated.
It's orange.
I've
you
seen
go
that,
there and it's like you're gone
out orange.
Yeah, it's completely and utterly the same. And you go and it's like, I'm a B&Q.
Do you know why that is?
Huh?
Do you know why that is?
Why?
It's because the guy who sort of started and ran B&Q all those years ago, he went to America and then took tips from the guy who ran Home Depot.
There you go.
Interesting fact.
That is an interesting.
I took that off that guy who does the reels.
I love it. That's so funny. Like that. They had rows of orchids with the same advice on, and I was like, "Why?" Like this, but it doesn't say the equivalent of. It says,
yeah.
And then my sister, who is not a plant person at all, but I'm trying to get her a bit more.
Oh, she was doing it.
Someone bought her an orchid and she took a photograph, and I was like, "Oh my god, you've got a plant!" He's like, "Yeah," and I done what it said on the label. I watered it with 2 ice cubes, and I was like, "No!"
But also, like conversely, a lot of people water their plants with water from the tap, but I think it's better to have a little bit of warm water as well, because in the winter you're suddenly going to shock your houseplants with even water from the tap. You know,
cold. Yeah. So. All of these things. All of these.
So militant.
Aren't we just? I've just moved house, and my some of my houseplants are genuinely dying.
Yeah.
Like genuinely struggling. Like, and I don't even know what to do.
I guess it's just change of environment, change of space. I hate all my houseplants, so.
You hate all of them.
They're all
Adam, do you have any houseplants?
Yeah, I do. At the minute, I've got a problem. I've got a bit of an infestation.
What do you have?
Nuts. So, so basically at the minute,
I bet your
my missus has started putting them outside, but obviously it's freezing cold outside at the minute. So they look a little bit worse for wear. And
you want LAVA-LITE?
LAVA-LITE, yeah, I've got some. I dropped it off. So I need to put it into action, and
LAVA-LITE will work.
It can come back in the arse.
You can also try a little bit of water mixed with a couple of drops of tea tree, only a little, and spray that around the base. That will kill them off as well. I think it's tea tree oil. Should kill it.
I've got them yellow pads, but they've not done the job. They've been been multiplying this year.
Also, if you're watering too much in the winter, then it's obviously going to be more moist than it needs to be as well.
And this year, so last year I brought my banana plant in, my red banana, and had it as a house plant, and it worked amazing. But then the problem was when I had my little seedlings on the front bedroom window, all of a sudden, like loads of green fly must have gone into the red banana and sort of hibernated. So all of a sudden, I had a green fly infestation in my front room, and not majority of the seedlings, they just sort of never recovered. I was always trying to.
I bet they got put outside as well, didn't they? But
I need to be careful as I'll get put outside as well.
This
year, I wanted to try and overwinter the red banana. Like how other people do, sort of stripping it down and everything. And I've not got round to it, and it's outside now, and it don't look happy.
You could wrap it outside.
Just wrap it. I just get some fleece and wrap it outside. I don't do
put it in the shed.
Just
a red banana.
Yeah, just wrap it with some fleece.
Oh,
I imagine your garden's pretty sheltered anyway.
Yeah, because you've got.
Well, it's quite windy. It's quite windy because we're on a hill, and then there's allotments behind, so there's not much sort of build up around where I am.
At the community garden I used to work at, we had a huge red banana, well actually various different varieties, and we used to wrap them with fleece every winter. They could never come out. They never came out. They were all wrapped and they always survived. If you do that and they die, don't come at me, but
I will.
Genuinely.
I'll invite with collaborator.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think occasionally we as gardeners complicate things, and there's a lot of conflicting advice, and then there's a lot of theory, and we complicate matters. Do you know what I mean?
Sometimes, have I told you this? Yeah. Have I told you this example? Who said it? I think I heard Matthew Pottage say it on a podcast. He was saying everyone was talking about how to prune wisteria. And he went to visit some lady, and she hadn't ever pruned it, but it flowered beautifully. And she said, well, no one prunes it in the wild.
And they still flower beautifully, right? Here, when you drive down through South Carolina, down towards the coast, right, there's wisteria that's taken over the trees, and it would be considered invasive because that's what it's doing. No one prunes it, no one cuts it back. But you drive down that road, and it is profusely flowering. It's still doing its amazing thing. So sometimes I do think
it's got a dodgy ear, look.
Oh, Snapper's joined in again here.
It's got a double stitch, look. It's all folded. I'm not happy.
Well, not all plants are perfect. Snapper isn't perfect.
Oh, yeah, true, actually.
That's just how it is.
I should love him regardless.
Can you take him to bed with you and give him a cuddle?
Oh, no, it's a bit angular for that. Melon, how is your garden? I saw you got a load of bare roots.
Yeah, I've got a little garden at the front that I'm trying.
He loves a bare root.
I do love a bare root. I had a load of bare roots delivered. It's really expensive to buy plants here, I found.
Really?
So I went online and bought a load of bare roots because they're cheaper and it's a great time of year to plant them. But the front of the house is full shade, completely full shade. So I've had to be like this. I've got some hostas that are particularly good for full shade, specific varieties as well that are.
And you don't have slugs in US, do you?
Well, there's no slugs or snails, but there are deer. Like the deer.
But is that lovely not to have slugs and snails?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Why do you not have?
Is that because it's too dry, or because they never reached there?
It's not too. It's really humid, so actually it can be wet. It's wet over winter, so
it's so weird not to have that problem.
I can actually remember walking past someone's house when we first moved here, and the front of their garden in deep shade was full of absolutely just tons of hostas, all kinds of different colours. It looked phenomenal, and they were sitting outside, and I said to them, "Wow, someone doesn't have snails." And literally, they looked at me as if to say, "What?
What's that?"
Like, what even a slug or snail?
The problem, right?
I was like, oh, okay. And it wasn't until I walked away that I realised that I don't.
You're gonna have to smuggle some and plant them in the garden.
We have deer and chipmunks and voles and that kind of thing. They'll still have a little go. And we have deer that come past the front of the house. So I've even looked for shade plants that are deer resistant in an attempt to.
Wow.
Do
you have jumping worms?
Jumping worms? No, I've never seen a jumping worm.
When I was in Minneapolis in the summer, we visited some gardens and we had to put on these special plastic shoes because in a certain area they have a problem with Japanese jumping worms, and you need to Google it. They're a real problem. They're gross when you see the video of them jumping around, and they're really, really invasive because they destroy all the roots of plants. Right. And so everyone was really paranoid about them being spread because it's quite a new pest. Yeah.
It's crazy how all these pests are sort of traveling about, and then like basically messing up sort of ecosystems. It's obviously a little bit like obviously the grey squirrel, red squirrel thing, obviously famous over in the UK. But it is funny because when you post things on Instagram, obviously it's not just people in the UK that see it. When you build something, and you'll get like comments where like, what about bears? What about bears in France? Or look inside my garden, did the thing with a trampoline. In it, and she had loads of comments. What about snakes under the trampoline and stuff like that?
Oh my god! Oh, I hate snakes.
Who's absolutely lovely, who I've made a lovely friend to. She's really into gardening.
I mean, she's about to slag them off.
No.
It's like when my mum says, "I'm not being funny, but."
Well, I'm not your mum, am I? We went for a beautiful.
I'm not being funny, but she's alright, bitch. Sorry, carry on.
Rob, what? This is what I have to deal with, Adam, on a daily basis via WhatsApp. We went for this lovely walk, and there was a buck in the garden, and we were both like, wow. And I was more in awe than her, probably, because she obviously sees them more frequently than I do. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. It's really close to us, And then we were talking about the different plants and the different wildlife in our gardens. And I was like, I love seeing, like when I first saw a chipmunk, I was really excited because it just looked so cute, just like chipmunks on TV. And then and she said, I had a British friend who came over and she was really excited about the squirrels.
Oh, really?
And I was but we have squirrels in Britain, like a lot of them. So I don't know where that one came from, but I was like, no, we have squirrels. So it's funny, isn't it, what we think we have in different countries in the garden.
Definitely.
Or squirrel. That's how you say it here. Squirrel.
What? That
sounds Northern Irish.
Squirrel. Yeah, it does a bit. You don't say squirrel. It's like squirrel.
It's like we say wirral.
Wirral.
Squirrel?
Say wirral.
What?
Wirral.
Wirral.
Squirrel.
Yeah. Kind of rolls into one a little bit.
Squirrel. I'm having a seizure. Bear with.
Adam, I would love to know.
What are you doing with that cuddly plant?
You're not allowed to know. Helen's about to ask you a very serious question.
Half of you both.
The fact that you have Snapper on the screen while we're recording this podcast 100% of the time is bizarre.
It's like a Muppet. Anyway, we have to ask Adam some very personal questions.
I was going to ask you a very serious question, Adam, and that is how you got into gardening, why you got into gardening in the first place.
So I think it was one of those things where, so in 2019, I had quite a bad year with pains in my arms and stuff. And so going into 2020, I wanted to do something to get myself moving again. And so it was a lot of sort of tension in my shoulders and stuff like that, which sort of
this on the right side, and a friend has had the same. I think from modern life, isn't it?
I was getting sort of tested for like rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, and they were like talking about sort of autoimmune things as well. It's quite scary, to be honest. It's quite a scary time. And then so obviously you hear of like sort of older people gardening, and the lady we got the house off, she was like a keen gardener, and I said to her, I'll keep the garden sort of alive. and I'd been slacking so far. All I'd been doing was just sort of mowing the lawn and chucking some weed killer down, and watering the camellia, because she said I had to water it loads in October.
To get the buds going.
So basically, I started just before lockdown, and then lockdown happened. I was working all the way through because it's pharmaceutical packaging that we work in. So was working on sort of like the COVID packaging and stuff like that. And then I just really enjoyed it. Like in the free time that I had, it was just sort of going into the garden and just just sort of diving in. And obviously it was hard to get plants and stuff, so there was a few sort of funny stories, and like I bought some hostas off of Amazon, and some bare roots came that you talked about bare roots earlier, and I thought I'd been scammed, and I was like, what the flip? Like, I've ordered some hostas, like what's going on here? And then I found
because you didn't expect it to be a root.
Yeah, I was. It looked disgusting, to be honest. And I found this little bit of paper in the bottom of the package. It was obviously someone had just sort of like dug them out their own garden and sold them on Amazon, and then just printed off a little slip of paper. And then
as if to demonstrate.
And then I did it, and they grew, and it was just amazing. Like and then a year later after that, as I hadn't really taken many photos, but my other half had, so she was like, oh, look at this, and I thought, oh, it'd be good to actually like log that. Like I've not been logging it so far, and that's one of my regrets, is not taking more sort of videos and photos at the start. And then just sort of started my Instagram then, and then met the sort of lovely community that's on Instagram. Posted a little bit on TikTok as well. TikTok can be a little bit more of a brutal place.
In what way?
It's sort of gone from there really, and really sort of like
what's brutal about
self
TikTok?
into it. I think on Instagram you have like more of like the core community that will sort of always sort of comment on your whatever you sort of post, whereas on TikTok there's still like a gardening community on there, but it's a lot more random who sees you sort of videos, and so you'll get some people who just like comment something just like calling you a swear word.
Just don't have any knowledge, I guess. Like Instagram, you probably got a base of knowledge from some people. And then also as well as that they've probably seen your stuff before, whereas on TikTok anyone could sort of see it.
On Instagram they've seen your journey, they support you in what you're doing as a person and as a gardener. On TikTok it's just any old thing, anyone might see it any time. I can remember someone saying something maybe a year or so ago, and I don't respond, I don't anything, I'm just totally uninterested in anything.
It's not worth it.
But it was something like, who does she think she is? She's way too old to be on here, or something like that. And I was just like that hurt.
Can I ask, did like then getting into gardening and being more active help your arm situation?
Because what it was is because I hadn't done anything for quite a long time, and my capacity to do physical exercise had diminished, and so it's like how they explained it to me was like a bath. When you fill up a bath, it will always overflow when you get to a certain point. So it's about sort of trying to increase the capacity of the bath to be able to fill up with more water, if that makes sense. And so it was all about sort of doing little bits at a time, and then sort of like working.
It was about being active.
So it's just sort of getting moving, being active. And obviously with my garden to begin with especially, there was a lot of it wasn't just sort of pruning things and stuff like that. There was a lot of sort of digging and like building with sleepers and stuff like that. So it definitely got me moving again.
That's cool. That's a nice feel good story.
yeah, definitely. And then I think after that, like you don't realise the sort of mental benefit until afterwards. Do you know what I mean? And that, like, I get a little bit annoyed sometimes when people talk about like, oh yeah, gardening's good for your mental health, in a way where it's like, oh, you should do it when you sort of almost like you should do it when you rock bottom. But like people talk about mental health, and mental health is like a bar, just like your physical health. You've got like when you used to play video games, you've got a health bar, and you've got to do things to replenish your health so that it doesn't sort of run out. And it's the same with sort of your mental health as well. And I think gardening's really good like for that. I think it's good for sort of calming you down and sort of grounding you. So when I say sort of it helped with my mental health as well, like, there's people in sort of far worse sort of situations, but yeah, no, I found it sort of helped for me where I was.
That's a very good message. It's like
that's really nice.
It sounds really cliche though, doesn't it? So sometimes I almost do.
Not at all. It's like, we have to, it's about maintenance. We don't do that very well. We're not very good at balance. I always say that about humans. We're just rubbish at balance. But like you maintain a garden, you have to maintain yourself wholly, mind, body and soul at the end of the day. And that's what gardening can give you. So yeah, I think that's a really excellent message for sure. I still can't sorry. I mean, I'd love to take all this super seriously, but he's still sitting there with snappers.
What? Only on half the screen, honestly.
To be fair, my screen, it only shows the person that's talking.
Does it?
Oh.
Keeps on going away, and then when he chirps up again, he's there back.
Ding dong.
I'm just not going to say anything else now, so he's in your screen the whole time.
Hey, weren't the lights cool last week? Oh my gosh, Ellen, I hope. Oh, you won't be able to go, really, will you? But it's just amazing, honestly. Really cool.
No, but you two in your little bromance world, I do actually have to go now because I did say I only had 30 minutes. I meant to be on another call. And it's been lovely chatting, but I'm happy to leave you in this little Zoom sphere.
Who's more important than us?
Pardon?
Who's more important than us?
That would be confidential information.
Oh, really? No, I'm actually, I have to tell you guys, I'm recording another podcast as well tonight, which is one all about pop music from the 80s. I was a guest 2 weeks ago and they actually asked me back. How cute is that?
You know your music, that is true. Like you do know your...
Do you want to know what it's called?
What's it called?
It's called PGOACA, Pop Gaze of a Certain Age.
Pop gaze of a certain age.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's basically all about crappy 80s and 90s music that nobody else hardly ever knows and like that we're just kind of mad for.
What? But that gays know that music because it's different music to what anyone else listens to.
Yes, no, straights wouldn't know it. No,
Straights wouldn't.
Really?
Definitely not. Definitely not straight guys. No.
You just have a whole different world. Like,
Try me.
No.
Yeah, try him.
Well, I'm going to talk tonight about Mr. Friday Night, Lisa Morris's song. Do you know that song?
No.
You're going to sing
Exactly.
it? I'm better with the tune, so if you sing it,
I'll send you it on YouTube. You won't know it. But I really want Dua Lipa to cover it. And I actually started a petition once on the government website. Yeah.
I love Dua Lipa.
I love Dua Lipa, but she's going to think you're a stalker.
Can I say something, Ellen? I know you need to go, sorry, but Lisa Morris is really interesting because she had an affair with Liam Gallagher 2 months after he married Patsy Kensit. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And they had a baby called Molly. Right, I've done all my research, ready for the podcast in a minute. And what is interesting is that Patsy Kensit put a heart emoji on one of Lisa Morris's posts on Instagram the other day. So they've obviously
They're
married
over it now. I mean, that was a really long time ago. Like, hopefully they're all adult and grown up and moved on.
I know, but it's so nice, isn't it? But then,
how did you notice that she'd like that?
Yeah.
Well, it just came up. I was there and I was like, "Oh, it's Patsy Kensit," and then I was looking into the history because she also had a child by Pete Doherty. Is that right? From the
No.
Yeah. Is he?
No.
He died, right? Yeah.
No, he's not. Yeah, he didn't die. He's still alive.
Michael was making up new gossip.
No.
I don't know about the child, but I never heard that one before. But Pete Doherty's still alive. Yes, he's now married with a baby, I think, too.
Really? I thought this was a guy that died.
Yeah.
Who died?
Who died?
Are you asking us or the covered plant?
I have to go.
He was married to Wayne Winehouse. And he's got a kid with Lisa Morris as well. Yeah.
I'm sure that they're all friends now. Like, have you seen the Liam Gallagher documentary on Netflix? He's like, his daughter with Lisa Morris is like, hangs out with them all now after a time where they didn't hang out. So, you know.
Oh, how funny. But I'm
sure that they're all grown up and friends.
I'm so interested in all those women in Primrose Hill are such good friends, and it's all spearheaded by Kate Thornton, isn't it?
Okay, well, I love that this
is another language for me.
I think it's like what's it called? Illuminati of Primrose Hill.
I want to listen to this podcast. Right, I'm going now. It's been great.
Yeah, I need to go as well. I'm so sorry.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure.
I'm sorry if Ellen was a bit crazy. She gets like that after a coffee.
Adam, just really quickly, where can listeners find you online?
At Green Fingered City Boy on TikTok and Instagram. And I also post on YouTube, but nobody watches, but I'll still post.
Okay. All right, there you go.
Put your Q Lights video on.
No, I still need to edit it.
Well, I got no reason to watch it yet.
Well, you need to give me a clip of your little teddy and then I'll put it in.
Yeah, all right, I will do.
See you in a bit.
All right, see you later, dude. See you, Melon.
LAVA-LITE, naturally the best. Effortlessly nourish and protect your plants with a collection of totally non-toxic, environmentally friendly, sustainable, pH neutral, lightweight and 100% natural products. The collection is made up of 8 different horticultural growing and potting media and pest control products, with each continually offering the same natural benefits: thermal protection, moisture retention and control, soil conditioning, and providing a nutrient boost, as well as being completely child, pet, and environmentally safe. Learn more at lava-lite.co.uk.
The music for the Plant-Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.